What if we could create a team like a league of superheroes? What if we could change a city? What if we could change the world?
So it started with Kathy and I. We were two at-risk young people, and our own stories of kind of emerging from really difficult situations, really high-risk situations, to trying to make it to a point of being healthy or being able to reach our dreams. It's kind of an epic struggle. And there was no way to be involved in that struggle and not turn and really care for more young people. So it was in January of 1991. And as I'm watching the teams warm up, I heard God speak to me really clearly and say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm watching a game. It's great. I love this." And he said, "Do you want to be the kind of person who writes about other people doing things, or do you want to be the kind of person that people write about?" I thought, well, that's a dumb question. Of course I want to be that kind of person. So he said, "You need to get up and leave." As I was walking out to my car, I realized God had fulfilled all my dreams. When I met Jesus, I wanted to be involved in professional sports. I just walked out of an Orlando Magic game. I wanted to be a professional writer. That's what I was getting paid to do. I wanted to be a professional musician. I was getting to do that. And so I said, "Well, God, I've only known you for 2 or 3 years, but you've already fulfilled all my dreams." And God said, "Well, you need to dream bigger dreams." And so before I could even start to try to think of my own dreams, it was like he popped one in there and he said, "What if you could build a team like a league of superheroes?" And at that exact moment, I just thought, well, maybe that would be better than all these things that aren't really reaching young people. So after hearing the really cool vision of a league of superheroes, you would have thought we just went out and built it. But actually our own at-risk situation as a couple meant we spent about 10 years really just fighting to make sure we each made it and fighting to make sure that our kids made it. And about that time, Chris Hyatt moved to San Antonio, Texas. And so we went with him to kind of be youth pastors alongside him being the pastor of the church. And there was a really cool young couple, Justin and Kate Karabuckle, who walked up to me at a prayer meeting and said, "Hey, do you want to start an accountability group?" And so we said, "We don't know what an accountability group is, but sure." And so we started this group with them in our house. I think it was every Tuesday night, just sharing our lives, sharing our stories. And then they said, "Hey, we've got this really cool friend, Beth Huff, and can we bring her?" And it was Kate's college roommate. And so Beth started coming. I remember one night, Matt and Lauren Sarter came, and little by little, a group started to emerge that would just fill our house. Many of them had come from Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas, and the InterVarsity chapter there. And as they started to come into the house, it became more and more fun. It was people sharing their stories. It was people who had experienced a little bit of who Jesus was, but wanted more. It was people who had experienced the power of God, but wanted more. And so before long, on Tuesday nights, we had over 60 college students flowing into our house. The one night, somebody was passing around a picture of a missing child or a missing teenager. And as the picture was going around, I remembered the whole idea of what about a league of superheroes, and realized that many of the people in the room were either working in a Master's of Education program, or they were social workers, or they were youth pastors, or they were college leaders. And so I just thought, wow, in a way, this is kind of a group that could be that. And so I said, hey, so 10 years ago, as I was walking out of an Orlando Magic game, God said, what if you could build a team like a league of superheroes? And like 20 heads turned very quickly and just said, that's us. That's what we want to be.
I think we were recognizing in an official capacity what many of us had been doing together for a while. So in that way, nothing had really changed. A lot of what we had done was very organic, and I think many of us were looking for ways to serve. It's really how we all connected. We rounded each other out. We all brought different things to the table, and we were all necessary to one another. I think we challenged each other, encouraged one another. And we just thought about what this could be.
Being around the original Boy with the Ball team was exciting. It was fun. For me, it was just a whole bunch of people that I got to live life with. And they all had different giftings, and there was energy, you know, when we would talk about things that we were dreaming about, because it was just the beginning, you know, it wasn't happening yet. So I think it was just kind of exciting to be a part of all of that.
So around the time that we were looking for a name, one of our team members' sons was carrying around a kickball like a security object. And one day it fell out of his hands and rolled into his dad's hands. And then he threw it back and they started playing. And it's like a light bulb went off in the boy's head. And he realized that this thing that he had been carrying along was actually used for something really wonderful. And so we use that as a metaphor for young people, and that this life that they're carrying around with their stories can actually become something really beautiful. And so we come alongside of them and help them reach their dreams.
I ended up moving to Texas, to San Antonio, really, I think, to give me a place to grow in faith and to be around the Boy with the Ball team that was there. I was kind of like the junior member person that was just around, that everyone just grabbed and pulled into different things, and whatever was happening. Like in those days, there was a lot of different things happening. There was an outreach on a military base. There was an outreach at a university campus for a college group. There was a lot happening on the south side of San Antonio, a youth group, kind of on the north central side. And people did a really good job of just grabbing me to go along with them into things. And I began to watch how, as my own life was beginning to change, it was also impactful to people around me.
Really early on, we came to understand that youth ministry was not just about ministering to young people, but it was really actually family ministry. It was a way of caring for families, equipping young people to be productive members of their community so that the community could grow, that it was really about caring for the community as a whole.
So some of the things I remember the most from the early days are, probably a few things stand out. One are people's pursuit of knowing Jesus and being around a group of people that their aim was to know him and to see more people know him. And probably one of the other things is the power of God. Like, we were encountering the power of God in a very tangible way. People were being healed, people were being delivered, people's lives were changing, including my own. Very dramatically, and it wasn't just about coming to something and knowing or talking about something that had no power. When you came together, when you talked, things were happening, and when you were out and doing things together, things were happening. One story in particular that comes into mind is we were playing basketball one night, and one of our guys broke his ankle. And literally you could see the bone like sticking out of his foot. And there were a bunch of gang guys around, and we didn't know what to do. So we kind of looked at each other just like, well, I guess we pray. So we prayed for him, and he got up and hobbled around. He's like, it's better, but it's still not all the way. So we prayed again, and then he got up and walked and was fine. And we all watched it, we all witnessed it. And you watched a lot of the gang guys in the background just like be like, what just happened? And got the opportunity in that there were already a lot of friendships, but just to share the power of what had just happened, and ended up starting a Bible study on the courts.
So even as it launched in those first few years, from the very beginning, we're saying we're going to learn how to do this here, and then we're going to launch down into Latin America next. And it was kind of funny as we said that from the beginning, but then around 2003, it was going so well and it was so cool. I remember thinking, why would we leave this? Why would we leave San Antonio? And I felt God say, you'll reach more young people in the United States if you'll leave, and you'll go learn how to reach young people in Latin America. And that's certainly proved to be the case.
Moving to Costa Rica was both exhilarating and exciting because it's where I came from, part of my family, and but it was also scary because we were leaving a full-time paid job and we were taking a leap of faith.
I didn't speak Spanish, and apparently you need that in Latin America, so that hurt, but I tried and I was learning. I used to tell people I felt like an actor in a silent movie. I would just walk around and watch other people talk.
I don't think we had a clue of how it was all going to work out. We definitely didn't have a safety net. We definitely didn't think things through. We were just like this. We knew in our hearts we were supposed to go to Latin America, and we did it. And then the Lord has been really faithful.
That first year that we were down there was a lot of failure, a lot of our weakness, and yet a lot of God still showing us that we were in the right place. It was also us doing what we call ethnography, but looking around the city to see what the big issues, and we identified in San Jose that the big issues were street kids, teen prostitutes, international school students, and then also the slums, or they call them precarios, where many Nicaraguan refugees or immigrants were living in shanties. We also, when we go to a new city, often will find people who are doing any kind of effective work and join them. And so we joined with a group that was working in the slums and working in the streets and started to walk around with them. They were going through a tough time. The woman who had founded it was dying of cancer, so they were on their way out. They really trained us in a lot of things. So everybody would drive by El Triángulo all the time. It's a slum on a hill that if you're driving out of the city was up on the left side, so you could not see it. And so I would just drive by it constantly in taxis from the first week we were there thinking, what is that like? Like, well, I wonder if you could just get out of a taxi and walk in there. And finally one day, had to go over and meet with a good friend of ours, Dr. Leroy Curtis, and our taxi drove right by that shanty on another side. And so when we got home that day, I just made a decision, we're gonna go. So when we picked up Joshua that day from school, he was obsessing over a toy. He was new to the country. Our kids, immigrated with us. And he was in Spanish class all day but didn't speak Spanish. So he just sat there all through 5 hours of Spanish thinking about a toy to make him get through the day. So I picked him up. He's like, Dad, can we please go get this toy? And I said, well, could we try one thing? And if at the end of doing this you still want the toy, we'll go get it. And he said, sure. So we went to the convenience store, the Gaviota, and we got a bag of lollipops, and we got in a taxi, and they said, hey, could you take us to El Triángulo? Could you take us to that community? And the first taxi just couldn't get in his head that some gringo would take his son to go be dropped off in a slum. So he let us off somewhere and said, I don't know what you're talking about. So we had to get in another taxi. And that guy cautiously drove us up to El Triángulo. So I looked at Joshua and I said, here's what we're gonna do. You're going to lead us into the maze that is this community, and you watch the way that you lead us in. So there's going to be a moment where I'm going to say, get us out of here. You've got to lead us back out. So Joshua loved the adventure, and so we went in, and very quickly we're surrounded by 30 people, very kind, big smiling faces, and we're giving out the suckers, and they said, when are you coming back? And will you be our friend? And they were so fun. I never imagined that walking into the community would be that awesome, and I was so excited. So. But then it was time, and so I said, Joshua, get us out of here. So we got into a taxi on the other side of the highway, and he kind of fell into my arms. He was laying across my lap, and he was crying. He said, thanks, Dad. I think everybody else would have just bought the toy.
Initially, as we went into El Triángulo, our hope was probably to learn. I think we just were so new at being in Costa Rica, but then also what did it really take to help young people in Costa Rica? Within what are things that are similar for all young people across cultures? What are things that are different and specific to Costa Rica? What does a young person do? How do they grow? Go through all the grades, but then what does reaching their dreams and fulfilling their purposes look like there? And so I think a lot of our initial probably going in was really to learn and to be alongside a group that had been there, but then in El Triángulo to get to know families and to see what was happening, and honestly really to see what the Lord was doing, where he was moving, and how we could participate in that.
The very, very beginning ended up just being a few women who would know us and trust us, and little by little, we would learn from them how to connect with and go deeper with each family.
But then probably the big breakthrough came when the dentist group came in the early part of 2007. So Agape Church in Michigan sent a group of young people and 2 dentists.
We had been asked to come down there, and basically what we did is we provided a dental clinic inside a garage in the middle of Precario.
people were lining up. Like I actually remember walking out at one point and just the sheer number of people that were in the line was so overwhelming. I walked back in and cried just because I was like, it's too many, we're not gonna be able to see that many people. And it just really felt like the Lord said, don't look at the need, like look at me. The need is for me to take care of. You look at me. And
we were working there, and during that, then the Boy with the Ball team at the time got to know a lot of the community members. So we were doing dentistry while they were infiltrating the whole community.
The clinic was able to see 109 people in 5 days, and it was life-changing. For a lot of people that had never been to a dentist or couldn't get to a dentist, all of a sudden it really meant that you weren't lying in bed at night with pain. Overall, I think the community just realized like, oh, they're here to fight for us and fight with us.
Y me recuerdo que ellos llegaron a hacer un programa de dentistas y demás, y yo quise, porque tenía la necesidad de, entonces cuando llegué ahí, yo pensé que iba a recibir solo un servicio, pero encontré algo más. Y ahí fue donde empezó, digamos, una relación no solamente de ir y recibir como ayuda, digamos, en ese momento en la clínica dental, sino que encontré amigos que formaron parte de mi vida y me ayudaron a poder, digamos, a estos sueños que yo tenía en este momento, a que se hicieran realidad, porque el día de hoy yo ya terminé la universidad, y mucho de eso ha sido por el apoyo, digamos, que yo recibí a través de la amistad de estas personas.
But very quickly, that breakthrough led to another breakthrough, because while they were in line, the family started to say, we really need school supplies, because then our kids could stay in school. The families averaged about $200 a month as far as income. Their average level of education was 3rd grade. And so the problem is that school supplies cost $100 for each child. So when January hit, if you have one child, you probably can figure a way to get that $100 together over a year. 2 children, it takes a little bit of a miracle to be able to pay for those school supplies. But by the time you get to 3 children, your children have to drop out. So that usually is about the time your oldest gets to 3rd grade. So Anna and I tried to think of the best way that we could get school supplies. We were very poor. So we put on Facebook, hey, we need school supplies. People from all across the United States started to donate a little bit of money. A church in Boston, High Rock, they had a bunch of school supplies that they brought in their luggage, and they showed up at the airport in January, so that was great. And then me and Anna had the money that we had, and we went to the store together to try to buy as much as we could. We had all these lists, and we got to the point where we thought we could probably help 10 people with these lists. I remember there was one young woman, Joanna, who had her 2 kids, and she came running down the hill the last day and said, hey, what about my list? And we just realized there's no chance of it.
So we had those lists, and then we were like buying the supplies and trying to see. And I really honestly think that God multiplied the money, because we ended up with everything that we needed on the list. And then we actually, I think, even ended up with a little bit of money left. It was like the day before school started, I think, that it actually happened. And so one mom in particular, Joanna, but we show up at her house, and I think all day she had been thinking, it's not gonna happen, they're not gonna be able to go to school. And we come into her house with these 3 backpacks, and we sit down with them. And I think when she saw the backpacks, that was one level of like, oh, okay, backpacks. But then when she opened the backpacks and just saw all the school supplies of it, she just fell apart in my arms and just grabbed on and wept. And then what it meant for her, what it meant for her family. And the boys, the next day, looked sharp in their uniforms and their backpacks and went off to school. And her family ended up doing really well, and actually ended up moving out of the Picario. We had a couple of students from Lincoln School, which is an international school in San Jose, and they were coming with us into El Triangulo, and they had a conversation with an 8-year-old girl. And in that conversation, realized she wasn't in school. She was right at that 3rd grade mark. And then they really were the ones that came up with the idea of like, well, what if we could do a tutoring center? We are in high school and we know a lot of students that could also help. So what if we started a tutoring center? So a lady in the back part of El Triangulo named Doña Angela opened her house to us, and we'd set up tables and chairs and would do the tutoring there. It quickly was bigger than that space.
Love Your City was really flourishing in El Triangulo. We had women's groups and we had kids groups, and there was a small group meeting middle of the week, and we had a tutoring center, and all of this was happening in this one house.
Simultaneously, Deborah and Philip Fulgham contacted us, and Philip was part of a design and build program, a graduate program at Auburn University, and they were looking for a project together as a class, and so contacted us and asked if there was a way that we could do something together, and we needed a community center. Then they came in April of 2009. Their design and build class came to Costa Rica, and for 2 weeks, alongside members of the community, began to build what became the community center.
Hi, my name is Veriana Soho, and I'm really excited to be here and to see this work because, well, Kat and I, 2 years ago, we came with the organization Boy with a Ball, and we decided to start a tutoring center in some small places, and now we're very excited to see what it has become.
Well, I'm Catalina Chacon, and, well, me too, I'm completely overwhelmed with the fact that we are now, that this is actually happening and that it's actually finished and we actually get to use it, and I don't know, I'm so excited to just actually seeing the kids in it now.
I walked in and I was with Anna and Cheeky, and we were all crying because they had even just painted and tiled the floor, and I was like, oh my gosh, like we were a part of this. This is like so cool. And then seeing it like filled with kids, and like there didn't have to be shifts, and the like life that was happening in it was pretty amazing.
And now you're really seeing the full element of Love Your City, where there was certainly a team that was meeting each week and growing. They were certainly going out and grabbing volunteers, and the levels of volunteers was sometimes kind of off the charts from every facet of a city. They were certainly drawing in donors, and groups were really committing to both give and go, which was so exciting. Now you had corporations coming in, like the Western Union Corporation, and you had the Intel Corporation and HP and some other groups. You had schools, and now you had international schools flowing in together. We were all going together, and then we were really getting to know so many people across the community, and so many people were starting to be mentored, or as we would later clearly say, discipled. And then small groups are growing. English classes on one night, and a girls group on another. And then the real power of it all was the community was transformed. You started to see in El Triangulo that the levels of education were going from a 3rd grade to a 6th grade. They were going from a 6th grade to a 9th grade. They were going from a 9th grade to 11th grade. And along the way, there would always be some obstacle you would hit. And then you had all these community resources come in and say, hey, we can overcome that obstacle. We were constantly failing each day. Like I'm talking about it in years, but in the living it out, it was moment to moment. It was rough moments. It was a lot of tears and a huge amount of prayer. And the thing that we just kept saying is God had called us to go and do this. God had made clear to us what we were supposed to do. And then God just would bless it every step of the way.
Que Jamie me dijo que había otro misionero junto con ellos que quería que empezáramos un curso de teología en Nicaragua, específicamente en la isla de Ometepe. Fuimos con él, conocimos a los pastores y empezamos el instituto a dar clases con los pastores. Un día, que estaba libre, vi a un muchacho con un hacha cortando un árbol y le digo, hola, ¿cómo se llama? Me dice, me llamo Erly. Ah, qué bueno, Erly. ¿A qué se dedica? ¿A botar árboles? Me dice, no, soy estudiante de leyes, estoy en los últimos 2 años ya de mi carrera. Le digo, ¿en serio? ¿Y qué está haciendo aquí volando hacha? Me dice, bueno, es que en vacaciones Don Tom me da trabajo para que yo pueda pagar mi universidad. Le digo, ay, qué bueno, qué bueno. Me dice, tengo 3 hermanos más que están terminando el colegio y van a ir a la universidad, pero no sé cómo vamos a hacer. Realmente ocupamos ayuda, me dijo él. ¿Y hay más chicos? Le dije, sí, hay más chicos aquí en la comunidad. Reúnalos. Y nos vamos a reunir para hablar. Nos reunimos y entonces yo les dije, vean chicos, hagan cartas. Digan cuál es su sueño y qué necesitan para lograrlo. Cuando yo llegué a Costa Rica traía como 13 cartas y me dice Jamie, oh, don Josué, ¿qué vamos a hacer con esto? Le dije, yo no sé qué vamos a hacer con eso, yo solo les prometí traer la carta y ahí está la carta. Así fue como empezó nuestra relación en Nicaragua.
And then I think the conversation also in that moment began of like, if we were to find, you know, some help and God was to do that, would you guys as young leaders be willing to be trained as a team, a Boy with the Ball team, to impact your neighborhoods and communities, which is a lot of what they had been saying in the letters anyway. So it was great. And they were like, of course, we'd love to do that. That's exactly what's in our hearts. So Jamie and Josue came back to Costa Rica, and one of our partners at the time, one of our best partners, they had helped with the community center, was Western Union. And so we had a meeting with them, and they had, one of their partner organizations was in Nicaragua, but through all of that, they agreed to give the beginning funding for the team in Nicaragua, for a team starting, and specifically for scholarships for these students.
Pronto don José también había conocido a otros jóvenes de la isla que también querían venir a la universidad, y fue cuando yo los conocí también. Don Josué nos dijo que podíamos escribir cartas de solicitud y probablemente alguien nos podía ayudar, pero no nos daba ninguna esperanza. Nosotros escribimos esas cartas y gracias a Dios la ayuda llegó. Estuvimos en el segundo semestre en finales de 2010 y éramos un grupo como de 12 jóvenes de la isla que estábamos juntos, y a partir de 2011 empezamos a ir a las comunidades a trabajar con el centro de tutoría, y pronto también habían otros jóvenes, amigos o estudiantes de la universidad que se involucraban con nosotros como voluntarios.
It started to occur to us that, well, leaders who are from a place are uniquely gifted to impact that place. And more powerful than the idea of having this amazing team of superheroes that can go anywhere is the idea of amazing teams of superheroes that could stand where they live, stand where they're from, and make a difference in their own communities. The writing on the wall of the idea that Indigenous leaders are the way to go is that we weren't Indigenous leaders. So what do you do with a bunch of really cool gringos or internationals? It did occur to us that growing to be a global organization with no one in the United States, to where most of the people who cared about us and funded us was kind of tough. First to go back ended up being Melody, because she was able to go back and start to do some of the fundraising work from San Antonio. But then realized we probably needed to be next. A lot of the people that had made it from 2006 to 2010, basically in Latin America, were the ones that could enter another culture. And I think that original global team was really, really good at walking into culture and laying down their need for reciprocity. Reciprocity of culture, but instead being able to build reciprocity of relationship. That is such a supernatural skill. That is a League of Superheroes. So now you have all these people. And it did help that right as we were moving back, Western Union provided the funding for us to go into Nicaragua. And so now you had San Antonio, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. So by very definition, whatever team that was going to provide care or support for those three was at least an international team.
It was important to go back. It was important to go back to the States so that I was able to be more available for donors and foundation meetings and things like that. It was really hard to do that in Costa Rica. So San Antonio was the place to go since we had a strong connection there already. Began meeting with people all around San Antonio and working out of the team member's house. It was my office. And so, just started doing what I could.
From like 2010 to 2013, we were really learning what Leverage City looks like in the US. In the early years in San Antonio, a lot was happening, but it wasn't, and it was within the narrative of just like, do what you can, make it happen, reach every young person. In Latin America, it's kind of formalized like, okay, if we go into a neighborhood with a group of us and like we pull in community leaders and then we start mentoring, like these small groups happen, and then you see the neighborhood change. So then really implementing that strategy in the United States hasn't happened yet, within that context at least. And so we're really learning what does it look like in the US. And so some things work, some things don't. In Latin America, everyone has their windows open and their doors open just because you don't have central air. In the US, most people have central air, at least in the southern US, in Texas. And so windows are closed, doors are closed. So you have to go in and knock and ask them to come out and have a conversation. And so we're really learning just different ways to get in with people. And then once we got into a conversation, they could see we were genuine and it would go somewhere. But there were some things that were different. So we were really figuring out does Love Your City work here? Okay, yes it does. How do we now grow it across all the other cities?
In my experience of walkthroughs on the west and east sides of San Antonio, I really learned about what it meant to serve a community based on what they needed, not what I thought they needed.
To be brought into a team where we were all fighting together for the same mission, where we were trying to grow in our own individual lives and replicate that in the community and with the young people we were working with, was something I had never been a part of before. And I just felt that was a really healthy and sustainable way to change the city and to change the trajectory for youth on the South Side.
A significant thing about coming back too, in the early years in San Antonio, one of the things we had dreamed about was being in schools.
So Velocity was a program that was created by Dr. Karcher, who was a professor at UTSA. And then he's a huge part of the mentoring world. So we already knew his name, but the fact that he was in San Antonio was a big deal. And so we would meet with him and just get his ideas about what mentoring is really about. Out of that, he told us about a program that he had created. And we started talking about how we could do that. And it kind of came from there. And so we met with Dr. Karcher. He gave us everything he had from his studies, but then also from his creation of his own experiences and things like that. And then started meeting with the principals, and that was, it wasn't easy to get it started. They weren't sure of what it would do, what it meant for them, what would they have to give and things like that. So we had to really push and help them see that this is actually going to be a helpful thing for them.
We launched in the spring of 2011, that January, February, we did a big assembly and they had the whole 9th grade. And then from that moment, Velocity kind of hit the ground running.
What was significant was meeting the kids who wanted to participate in a program that was outside of themselves. They knew that this was a program that was going to require something of them. It was impactful to meet with the kids and walk through what it meant to be a mentor to somebody, and to see them get excited about meeting with somebody on a regular basis and see that their development of a relationship would make an impact for somebody else. And then as well as not just for the other person, but for themselves.
When we moved back to San Antonio, we were there for about 3.5 years and had sensed that there was change coming. And we were praying about where we would end up. We knew something was, whether it was going to be another country or a state within the United States, we didn't know. We had some ideas of places that we could go, and we came out to Atlanta to come to a wedding. And this had been our original home, where Atlanta is where our marriage got restored, where people had faith for us and loved on us, kind of the same way that we love on people now. And so we just never thought, I think we could come back home to this home.
And the pastor of the church, Pastor John Duke, asked if we could meet. And so we met with him, and he was in the final years before he passed away from Parkinson's disease. And he just said to us, he said, you need to be in a global city. And we said, yes, sir. And he was a very prophetic man. And he said, well, you should be in Atlanta. He said, we have a hub airport. You're going to need that. And he said, you can be anywhere. He said, but we're the group that puts you together. And he said, and we need you. He said, I'm not going to be around forever, and your best friend's going to be the pastor, meaning Chris Hyatt. And he said, so what do I need to do? Prophesy to make this happen.
Being on the West Side, it was interesting because it's such a different culture than I think what we had previously been in, both in Texas and then in Costa Rica. So I think it was a great way to really implement Love Your City and see, that it works across any culture and any kind of situation.
Boy the Ball was launching fully into the city of Atlanta. So as I got back, we were already in conversations with Atlanta Public Schools about starting Velocity at 2 schools that were kind of in crisis. And we were looking for a neighborhood to start Love Your City. And so we started after school at Maynard, Jackson, and Carver High School in the spring of 2014. The Velocity implementation in Atlanta was very different, just like Love Your City was very different in San Antonio, just because culture, culture within cities are different. Culture from country to country is different. And so we kind of figured out what Velocity looked like within the culture of the south side of San Antonio. But then moving it to Atlanta, there were just some things that were different. But one thing was true was there were young people and they were hurting and they had dreams. And so that's something that we could relate on. There were lots of things that were different demographically, but the relational aspect, the part of these kids are hurting and they have dreams and they're concerned they're never going to get there because of how their life is set up, was still very true.
I think it was a big time of learning for our team in particular. Had a lot of people who had never really done anything like that. And so if I look back, it's probably was a big training time. Right as we moved from San Antonio to Atlanta, we added both Nigeria and Kenya pretty quickly following, basically the next year.
Through our relationship with Kevin Davenport's church out in Orange County, California, I was able to know a wonderful couple, John and Erica Norton. And at one point, John said, hey, I know this young man who's working with an organization that works in Kenya. He's a US student who went over on a trip and got connected with this group of Kenyan leaders. And they've created an initiative that's working to help street boys. And John was just saying, they've reached a point, this group, with a US contingent and a Kenyan contingent, where they're growing, but they're probably growing past their capacity. So they could really, really use some capacity building. Would you be willing to talk to them?
At that moment, there was so much need of having an organization that will be able to mentor us, and having an organization also that will be able to work with us, because there was so much fatigue, and there was so much fatigue from the team leaders in Kenya. We wanted to be part of Boy the Ball, so that also we could be part of the movement that was happening within the globe. Also, we remember the stories that Jamie used to give about a league of superheroes, and we wanted to be part of those superheroes in Kenya.
I got this text message, this famous text message from John Norton that just said, what do you think about the idea of Fikisha, which is just a Swahili word that means to reach. But what do you think of Fikisha being absorbed into Boy the Ball and becoming Boy the Ball Kenya?
So in 2014, Jamie and Kathy and Anna and myself and my wife Alana all went to Kenya together and got to spend time with the guys, and we got to talk and dream and pray about, would this work, and could we become a Boy the Ball team?
One of the things that happened was that Dr. Robert Grant, he had a good friend, Terry Walling, who worked out doing coaching that was really with tremendous credentialing towards life coaching, to really walk with somebody through asking questions to pull them through processes of growth. They hosted the training at the Rock Church in San Diego, And I was alongside one of the Rock Church's staff members, Dave Stewart, great pastor. And many of the exercises we would be teamed together, so we'd have to talk about something about our lives. And so he was getting a strong whiff of Boy with the Ball, and I learned a lot about the Rock Church. So in the middle of it, he just turned and he said, hey, I have to talk to you about this leader. He's a Nigerian who's been here the last few years, and he's gotten his college degree, but he's also within our leadership training program. And he's really interested in getting married to a girl that he grew up with and moving back to Nigeria. And it sounds like what you guys are doing might be interesting to him. So that was how we met him. And then we ended up having some of our first Skype or Zoom calls with him. And he really was the real deal. Like, his heart for young people was just as like ours. There's just life in Emeka, and it's impossible to deny. And we kept making it hard on him because he was really one of the first times we met a leader that way.
I kept praying. It just drove me to in prayers so that I would really find the heart of God and what He's asking me to do. And that was what happened in 2014 when I invited Jamie and Anna.
That was actually the beginning of Boy with the Ball Nigeria. And I remember very well, it was September 2nd, 2014. And what happened was that we gathered in a small room at Missouri Hotel, then Missouri Hotel at Maryland, Enugu here. And we just talked about the possibility of starting Boy with the Ball and Love Your City in Nigeria, in Enugu. I know it was a tough one because it's something that is very foreign to us, knowing the fact that the culture of the people around us, poverty has driven people to really look at what is in it for me in everything they are doing. So it was a tough one, but one thing that I came to understand was that this is something that God is calling us to do.
So then it felt like the reach of Boy with the Ball grew very significantly, very quickly. We also realized in the following years that our reach had expanded, but our base probably needed to grow. And so then I think what you really see over several years is the development of a lot of systems and a lot of things put in place where our base would be strong so that the reach could continue extending.
In 2015, one of our partner churches reached out to see what it would take to have a Boy with the Ball team in their city. Boston was a place we had always wanted to be. We had longtime friends in Boston, but then also Boston is a city that has some of the highest and lowest educational outcomes in our nation. Boston is home to some of the best schools, some of the best research institutions, and some of the best organizations in our nation. It is also home to a high immigrant population who struggles under the weight of not knowing how to navigate American culture and not knowing how to access the resources available to them.
And so in 2015, we went on a scouting trip, Anna, Jamie, Kathy, and I, and we met with senators and we met with representatives, but we were also there for a fundraiser that was being hosted by some of the members of Covenant Church of Arlington and some of the people in the financial district in the city to raise seed funding for a launch in Boston. That next year, in summer of 2016, Pete and I had been married and we were sent to Boston for the summer. And so we met with everyone. We met with every organization we could get a hold of. We met with every contact Pete had and that Brian and Kathy had in the church had. If someone said, oh, you should talk to so-and-so, we were like, great. We left the meeting, sent an email, tried to get with them that week. And out of that, there was a resounding yes, young people need it. We're very excited that you're here. How can we help? And in that, the very last week that we were there, we met David Daniel.
I met Jamie, Christine, and Pete in 2016 when they came in to explore the possibility of establishing Boy with the Ball here in Boston. And so we met in Panera in South Bay. That was the first time I met them. And Jamie, Christine, and Pete kind of shared the vision of Boy with the Ball. And that was the beginning of a journey that I would just say that had led me to become the first city director in 2017.
In 2015 and 2016, there were some pretty big anomaly gifts that were pretty life-changing for Boy the Ball, which meant like staff increases and new office and just a lot of shifts. It really helped establish the global, you know. But then 2017 rolls around and those gifts, there wasn't a third anomaly gift. And so we kind of hit a wall. And then everyone is really faced with the question of, okay, are you supposed to be here? Like, is this where you're supposed to be working? And if it is, it's gonna look different. While that was happening, our entire Velocity cohort graduated. So the students that we started with in 9th grade that were mentors, they mentored through their senior year and they all graduated. And then the neighborhood that we were implementing Love Your City in on the west side, like all of the residents we were working with moved. Most of them were resettled with another organization that put them in better, more sustainable housing. And in that moment, we were really seeking the Lord and just kind of asking, like, Lord, what do we do? Like, we've run out of money, our kids have graduated, the neighborhood is closed, and we really sensed the Lord was pruning us. Like it's not that what was happening was bad, it was time for a shift. And so he was just paring us back to kind of where he is. And it was a really sweet time for all of us, because then we were faced with the question of like, okay, we're supposed to be here, now what does it look like? Like, where are we supposed to go?
It was right at that moment that Ann Kramer, the famous leader in Atlanta, turned to us and she said, "What are you doing in Atlanta?" You know, and we said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "We said there are such needs in Atlanta. It's like the third worst place to be a child." And she said, "Oh, I know there's needs here, but the needs aren't going to go away." She said, "But what about Gwinnett?" She said, "You guys are so uniquely gifted. You have such language skills, culture skills, your capacity to get into those neighborhoods. You're badly needed in Gwinnett. Gwinnett is going to explode if something doesn't happen."
Gwinnett County is a diverse and growing county. It only continues to expand in its number of cultures and its number of people, and truthfully in the number of issues that it faces. Because we were a team who had experienced so many different cultures, we had learned how to be agile in the midst of learning how to serve universally, no matter where people come from. We moved to Gwinnett to see what we could do.
My friend Nathan Smith was connecting with Martha Finnegan. Martha began to share with Nathan some of the work that she was trying to do at Berkmar High School. Martha was an assistant principal at the time, and I think from what I remember, she was really trying to be a bridge to the community and the community to the school. Nathan had invited me into the conversation with Martha because of the work that I was doing in Lawrenceville, especially with a variety of different sectors of the community. And so that was through the context in which I met Martha. And based on what she was sharing about her hopes and desires for the students and how the school could connect the students to the community, it just seemed obvious to me that Boy with the Ball would be an incredible partner to have at the table for that conversation. And then when we met Jamie and we met Anna and we discovered the model that Boy with the Ball had been really implementing for years all around the world, it just seemed like they had figured out how to effectively build that bridge. And it seemed like that's what Martha was trying to do, was build this bridge between the school and the community. And it seemed like that Boy with the Ball really had an answer to the questions that she was wrestling with.
I think, well, there's too many. The whole program is my favorite part. You can't do one part without all the other pieces being there to make it work and to make it be important. So building the mentors, having those relationships build with the adults that are training them and watching that happen, and then watching the mentors develop those relationships with the mentees, and then to watch that family dynamic come into play, where all of a sudden the families started getting together and we're just like, wow, this is really cool. We all share the same concerns and dreams and successes that we want for our kids, or and make us a part of this community, which is bigger than the school.
The first time we went to Sarah Court, we were driving with the team, and we had gone to a few other neighborhoods to see where we would stay. And we drove into this one, and we looked to the right, and there was a family outside, and we just went to talk to them. But it was like a party. They were hanging out and talking and laughing. And so then I immediately started speaking Spanish. It was welcoming, and I was like, well, I guess I guess we have to stay here, like meeting this family that is so welcoming and said things like, we were waiting for you guys, or you guys are so different. There's something different about you.
In some ways, I feel like we're just getting started. We've been in Sarah Court Apartments for 4 years, and there are certain parts of it that I would say it's the best implementation that we've had, especially if you look at the parts of Love Your City that we're saying involve churches and businesses really coming in and being a part of it. I think that has developed significantly. But it does feel like we're at the cusp of kind of a breakthrough. If I think about it, there's a lot of pretty significant things that have happened, I think, including the establishment of, a tutoring center. We have 20 plus kids coming each week. ESL classes has been a huge part, and we're seeing more and more people add to that, get excited about that. The Boys and Girls group, I think in hoping to start a parents group, or what's happening with the youth group and so many of the young people flowing through the youth group now, and then watching several of the young people now being developed as leaders in their community. So I think it's been very significant, the growth that's happened so far. But then it also, I think, equally could look around and say, like, so much still has yet to happen.
In 2019, El Triangulo was torn down. The Costa Rican government worked alongside our organization and others to help relocate families to tear down the community. The end of El Triangulo was one of the more significant points in our story. It was the end of a community and the fruition of Love Your City, of years of the power of God and the power of relationships transforming an entire place and lifting an entire community out of poverty.
I will never forget the feeling of being there and seeing those walls coming down, seeing the community slowly depart, and really having this feeling in my heart of everything that had happened in that place. All of the friendships that were made, the tools that were provided, the education that was provided, all of the ways that God moved within different people's lives and taught us so much, and it just was such a cornerstone in the community for so long, and I could feel all of that as we were saying goodbye to it.
En lo personal, y creo que hablo también por mi familia, fue muy lindo haber cumplido un sueño, que era comprar la casa. Siempre desde muy pequeñas, toda mi familia nos preguntaban cómo nos mirábamos dentro de 10 años. Nuestras respuestas eran tener una casa, tener una familia, y aparte de tener nuestra propia casa y nuestra propia familia, era comprarle una casa a mami. Y creo que eso hace 2 años, creo que mi hermana mayor Raquel compró la casa.
As we think about the last 20 years, what we've learned is that we are made for Love Your City. We are made to reach out. We are made to turn back. We are made to lay our lives down, to serve those around us, to love our neighbors. It is critical, it's essential, it is life-changing, and we love it.
Love Your City isn't this formula of just like you come in and you do this one thing. It's a way of existing in a community. It transcends culture and it transcends circumstances into just relationship and friendship and into finding God's purposes in it.
It came out of a living relationship with Jesus that was put into practice in a neighborhood.
One of the miracles of Boy with a Ball is the number of levels on which it works. That is, it's not just ministering to youth, it's ministering to donors, it's ministering to volunteers, it's ministering to staff. It is a team of teams and a network of life-giving relationships that I have rarely experienced.
And so you come and you get to take part in this community coming alive, and you get to see kids from youth groups take part in more active and loving communities than the ones that they're from, and you get to see CSR departments and companies begin to thrive because their company is starting to make a turn towards caring for the community. And along the way, you see the neighborhoods jumpstart into what it could be.
And then that's the kind of thing where that happens in one family and another family and another family. It starts to change that whole community. Sort of the water starts to go over the dams and just start flowing.
I think it's really incredible when we do see life show up, and where tutoring centers aren't just tutoring centers, but they're a place where a lot of young kids get to touch the power of the Lord through relationship. And English classes aren't just English classes, but they're places where we are weaving communities together, and we are loving each other in different ways.
So Love Your City is a group of people looking at where they live and figuring out how they can love the people in that city the best way that they possibly can. I think it's all of us realizing that we live where we live for a reason. I think it's interesting because Love Your City is not something that you do just once. It's not like you do something and then you can say, okay, I've loved my city, I'm done. It's a process. It's really just walking with people in their brokenness and in the really practical things that they need, and just being with them, being their friends, building relationships with them, and realizing that relationships can really change everything.
I'm really grateful for all that has happened over the last 20 years and what the Lord has done in us, individually as much as what He's done in Boy with the Ball collectively. And I don't just mean the team. I mean every board member and every donor and every person who's been impacted by Boy with the Ball or participated in Boy with the Ball, every church, I probably think of all of that as Boy with the Ball when I think of Boy with the Ball. And I am very grateful for everything that God has done.
It feels a little bit like hearing a secret before a lot of other people heard something, and then watching it be a pretty darn good secret, you know. For me, it all comes down to the very beginning, which is how do you reach more young people? How do we reach young people better than the bad guys do? And how in every block of every city across the world do we win and win young people's lives and see them make it out of really horrible things and make it into their dreams, and when at all possible, make it so as many as possible come to know Jesus and to grow into their God-given potential. That is the dream. The dream is, how could it happen? How could that happen more?